y'all watching. I'm How Abstract. I'm an artist and I'm an art teacher. And today is all about display labels. I use my display labels when I'm vending at markets and fairs, and they're very neat. They're very simple to make. It's readable, which is what you want when you're making a label. It's the most important part. And this video is going to be all about how I make these simple, neat labels. So, without further ado, I don't want to talk too much. Let's make some display labels. So, first things first, when making labels, you have to design the label. So the app I like to use is an app called Procreate. It's about $9.99 to $14.99, so anywhere between $10 to $15, and it's a flat rate fee. It's not a monthly fee. I absolutely love this application. It's affordable, and you're able to do a lot in the application. You can also use a software like Canva that is also free, but I like to sometimes draw things freehand, and Procreate allows me to do that. So to make my labels, I use this app here called Procreate. I use this to make labels, flyers. As I said, I'm an art teacher. I use it to make worksheets. I use this app for absolutely everything. I use it to draw my digital art. I use it for everything. I absolutely love this application. And it's, as I said, it's much more affordable than softwares like Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, and the likes. And don't get me wrong, I love Adobe, but this is way more affordable. So I'm using Procreate to make my labels. I like to make the size of my page the same size of my paper that I'm going to be printing on. I'm going to be printing my labels out on 5x7 inch cardstock. So my paper here on my Procreate is also the size 5x7. And if you, when you open the Procreate app and you click the plus sign up here and you click new canvas, it allows you to millimeters, centimeters, inches, pixels, create the size that you need for your work. So as I said, I clicked inches, I put 5 for the width, the height is 7, and I leave the DPI 150, which is good. And that's how I start. So I have my 5x7 paper, and now I'm ready to make my labels. I fit 2 labels on one 5x7 paper because it saves room and it saves materials. So I have my 5x7 inch. Now from this step, you can decorate your background how you want the background of your labels to be. As I said, labels, the most important thing is that they're legible, that they can be read easily. So I keep my labels very, very simple. So for my background, I just put my logo, and I bring the opacity all the way down to about 40, 45, so that it's not too bold. And that is just the simple background I use for all of my labels. It's just my logo, a monogram of my logo. So once I have this, then I create 2 rectangles because, as I said, I make 2 labels per sheet. So I have my 1 rectangle and I have my 2nd rectangle. I just use the color white because, as I said, you want the labels to be legible. You want people to be able to read them easily. So I do 2 white rectangles, very simple. Then I also like to create a border around the white rectangles just so that it stands out a little bit, but still without being too overpowering. So I just use a dark color from my logo color scheme, and I just outline the 2 rectangles. So this is how it's looking so far. This is going to be one label, and this is going to be another label, all on one 5x7 sheet. After I have this, the last thing to do is just add text. When it comes to text, again, you want to choose font that can be read easily. You don't want to really use script. You don't want to really use any funky type of fonts that look nice but maybe hard to read. So I stick to simple fonts like Smiley Sands. If you click the wrench in the left hand corner and you go to add text, it brings up this whole menu, and then you go to edit style and you have all of these fonts over here that are already preloaded in Procreate. As I said, Smiley Sands is a good one. Of course, Times New Roman, any font that is easy to read. And then you click that font, right? Also, once you have your font and it says what you want it to say, you want to move it and center it in the white rectangle. If you look down here, you see it says snapping. If you click that and turn on magnetics and turn on snapping, it will help you center your text so that you have some continuity throughout your labels, right? You don't want your text to be not centered. You want your text to be nice and centered in the middle. So I always, for this, use the snapping tool so that my text is in the middle. So now that I have my labels and the text says what I needed to say, I needed 2 labels, one for my bag charms and one for my mini art prints. Now that I have the text, I can save this to my photos. So if I click the wrench again and I go to share, it gives you all of these options: PSD, PDF, JPEG, PNG, a TIFF. There's also other options down here as well if you want to animate, but we're just doing simple labels, so we don't need any of that. I save it as a JPEG. It exports, and then I can save the image to my iPad. Once I have it downloaded and saved to my iPad, I can print my labels. Now my labels are all printed. As I stated earlier, I print my labels on 5x7-inch cardstock, and I place 2 labels on 1 piece of cardstock to save paper. I already created 2 labels so far, a display label for my bookmarks and a display label for my vinyl stickers, and these are already laminated and finished. This is the end result. So we want to transform these and have them look like these two. So the next step is to laminate. Now I do have a thermal laminator, but I feel that's unnecessary for display labels. You can just use self-adhesive laminated sheets, which is what I have here. It's much more affordable than the sheets that I pay for my thermal laminator. So we're going to use these self-adhesive laminating sheets, and all the materials I use in this video, I will link them below. So now it's time to laminate. And the reason why I laminate the display labels is because it gives them a more polished and professional look. Also, and this is the biggest part, you can reuse the labels over and over and over again instead of creating new labels every time you vend. So that saves material and ink. So let's get into laminating these display labels. Now I have my guillotine out, and it's a beautiful lavender purple because I absolutely love purple. It's my favorite color, which is why I use the color in my logo for my business, but that is besides the point. Before we laminate our display labels, we want to separate them so that they're individual. So I'm just going to cut this cardstock down the middle. and then I'm going to clean it up so that it's ready to laminate. So I'm going to, as I said, I'm going to cut it down the middle. I'm going to line it up just to make sure it's nice and even. Then I'm simply going to cut it like so. Now, you see the space up here is much thinner than the space down here, so I'm going to cut it a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I still need a little bit more cut. So it looks like that. That's much better. So I have the fine art prints. Now I have the mini art prints. As you can see, this is too much room. So we're gonna cut some of that off, and we might cut a little bit off from down there too. So let's make sure it's nice and even. And then cut, let's see. I'm gonna cut a little bit more from the top, just a tiny bit. Yeah, that's much better. So now I have my mini art prints and my fine art prints display labels, and now we can laminate them. But matter of fact, I'm gonna just go ahead and cut my bag charms label too. So let me line it up, get it nice and straight. Hold down the guard. That's how that look. Okay, we're gonna take a little bit more from the bottom, just a smidge. There we go. That looks awesome. So now we have our 3 display labels, and now we're ready to laminate. So this is the self-laminate sheet. It comes in 8.7 by 12-inch rectangle, but we want to cut it in half so that we can use it to laminate our label. So all I'm going to do is cut this sheet in half, and I already measured my label so that I know where to cut. I just want 2 halves like this, nothing too crazy. And now I can laminate the display labels. So now I have my 2 halves of my self-adhesive laminate, and I'm going to place 2 display labels like so on 1 half of the laminate like that. Real quick, before I do that, I want to just cut the corners. It just, to me, gives it a more polished look. That part is absolutely optional, but you see how these corners are curved. So I'm gonna do that before I laminate. And as I said, I'll have all my materials linked below. All the materials that I can link, I will have them linked below. But yeah, I'm just cutting the corners to make them round. Nothing too fancy. And as I said, I just feel it looks more polished and professional. So I just rounded the corners of each of these 3 display labels. I'm going to set this one to the side right now because I'm going to be laminating that one by itself. We have these 2 display labels. I'll move this to the side really quick. Okay, so now that we have our labels, and before you laminate, you want to make sure that they don't have any dust or debris on them, any hair and things like that. You want to make sure all of that is removed, because if not, of course, it will get sealed in when you self-laminate, and you don't want that. So make sure all the debris and, you know, if any particles are off of your display labels. Now, we're gonna take 1/2 of the laminate and you're gonna peel off the protective film that protects the sticky side. And now we're going to just place our labels on the sticky side of the laminate. And I try to get it as centered as possible. Let me zoom in a little bit. So I have my bag charms, and I'm gonna put this one about right here, like so. And then you wanna apply pressure, of course, to make sure that it's sticking. And I always wash my hands before doing this. You don't wanna, get any stains while you're applying pressure to your display labels. So now that I have those 2 labels on the adhesive, I take my other half of self laminate and I peel off the film. Sorry, I have to get out of frame so I can actually peel the film. Okay, there we go. All right, film is gone. Now I'm going to apply this part of the laminate on top. Right, so this is how you seal the labels. You want to get it, if you cut the halves perfectly, it should just match up. And now again, I'm applying pressure. And you want to make sure you apply pressure around the label like so. Just applying pressure. There we go. Now you have laminated your display labels. Don't worry about these air bubbles because that part is going to get cut off. So now we have something that looks like this. Now it's time to cut again with the guillotine. Okay, my guillotine is back out and I'm ready to cut my display labels. And all you're doing, again, the same way you cut your labels earlier, you're just going to be doing that again. So I'm going to line my label up so that it's nice and straight. Cut. All right, so I have something that looks like that. Now I'm gonna cut it down, some at the top, the bottom, this side, this side. So I'm gonna cut off that extra laminate. So now we have something that looks like this. And I'm gonna trim some more from the top. So now we have this, perfect. Now, what we're gonna do again is cut the corners. Because as you can see, right, I rounded the corner of the cardstock and I also rounded the corner of the laminate. There you go, you can see I rounded the corner of the laminate as well as the cardstock. And as I said, that part, well, this part rather, is completely optional. I just like it because, as I said, it makes the display label look more, you know, professional. So, there we go. And I have, oh, that one right there didn't quite go through all the way. Let me redo that. There we go. There we go. Now I have my book charms, my bag charms label. Perfect. I could actually cut more on this side here, but I'm just gonna leave it as it is. It looks good. Doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be readable, right? Legible. So looks good. Now I'm gonna cut down this one the exact same way. See? Looking good, looking good. And now let's cut our corners. Make sure that went through. Sometimes the laminate is thick, so I have to cut the corner twice, but no, it went through. And now I have my mini art prints display label. Right? Perfect. Now all that's left is for me to laminate and cut the last one. I had to move my guillotine so I can laminate my last display label for my fine art prints. And it's the exact same process. I'm just gonna go through it again. I have the 2 halves of my laminate, and this time I cut one sheet in half and then I cut the half in half because I just have this one label left over to laminate. So again, same process. We're gonna take off the film that protects the adhesive side of the laminate. Then we're gonna take our display label and we're going to zoom in a little bit, make sure there's nothing on the label. And then we're just gonna press our label to the sticky side of the laminate. And I went and washed my hands again because it's so hot over here in the tri-state. So I like wiped the sweat off my face, and then I had to go wash my hands again. Because remember, you don't want to get stains on your labels when you're doing this part of pressing it to the adhesive. Now I'm gonna take the other half of my laminate. I'm gonna peel off the film. Sometimes it's kind of hard to there we go. Get to find the film. And now we're gonna press this adhesive side right on top. And then we're gonna press. And I'm just making sure that's adhered. There we go. Now we have our laminated display label. Time to trim the edges. I have my guillotine back out, and we're going to simply trim the edges of our last display label. So again, we're going to line it up, make sure it's straight. I'm going to cut, turn, make sure it's straight, cut. That one didn't go all the way through. There we go. Make sure it's straight, cut, turn again. Make sure it's straight and cut. Let's check it out, see how it looks, see if it needs more trimming. No, it looks pretty good. Actually looks perfect. Now again, last thing, we're gonna cut our corners. Let me put the arm back down. Now we're gonna just cut our corners. Perfect. Make sure it went through. Perfect. Now I have my fine art prints display label. So yeah, everyone, that is it. That is how I make display labels, nice and simple, using as few materials as I can. And as I said, my goal with the display labels is that they're neat, they're clean, and that they're legible so that the customers can read them easily to be able to identify my products. And I also have these cool swivel display holders, right? So it looks like this. And as I said, I will link all the materials that I can link down below. I have these swivel display holders. So one end clips to the display label, and then you have another end that clips to your stand, right? Like so. And then customers can easily identify which products are which is awesome. And what you want when you're vending at markets. You want your customers to be able to identify what products they're looking at. But yeah, this is how I make display labels. I hope this video was helpful, and I will be seeing you all in the next one. Deuces. One love.